In the fog-draped elegance of Kensington Square, 1928, a ghostly figure in white haunts the night, stealing jewels, books, and secrets, its eerie wail chilling the hearts of London's elite. Enter Hercule Poirot, the master detective, whose little grey cells unravel a web of greed and deception. From a hidden attic trapdoor to a cunning mechanical trick, Poirot exposes a masquerade where no one is what they seem. Will he unmask the thief before the square's shadows claim another prize? Dive into the ghost of Kensington Square, a mystery where truth cuts through the fog. Chapter 1. The Shadow in the Square. The autumn of 1928 had draped London in a shroud of silver mist, and nowhere was its melancholy more palpable than in the refined enclave of Kensington Square. The Georgian houses, with their tall windows and iron railings, stood in orderly ranks around the central garden, where ancient oaks whispered secrets to the dusk. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective whose fame for unravelling the impossible had not dimmed in retirement, had taken temporary lodgings at number 17. He sought respite from the bustle of Baker Street, craving the symmetry of the square's architecture and the promise of undisturbed evenings. Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and chronicler, had joined him, persuaded by Poirot's insistence that the air of Kensington would rejuvenate his spirits. Their third evening began with the ritual of cocoa, served in delicate porcelain cups, the fire casting a warm glow across the parlour's polished mahogany. Poirot, impeccable in a tailored suit, his moustache waxed to perfection, was expounding on the virtues of order when a sound pierced the stillness. A low, mournful wail that seemed to rise from the heart of the square. It lingered, eerie and tremulous, before fading into the fog. Hastings, ever the pragmatist, set down his cup with a clink. "A stray cat, no doubt," he said, his tone dismissive. "London is full of them." Poirot's grey eyes, sharp as cut glass, fixed on the window. "A cat, mon ami? Non, non, the little grey cells, they protest." This was no feline cry. It had purpose, intention. We shall see. The following morning, as they breakfasted on buttered toast and marmalade, a knock at the door announced Mrs. Clara Henshaw, the housekeeper of number 12. She was a woman of middle years, stout and flushed, her hands twisting a handkerchief as she stood in the doorway. Her eyes, wide with unease, darted between Poirot and Hastings as she begged an audience. Poirot, ever courteous, ushered her to a chair, noting the tremor in her voice as she spoke. "It's the ghost, sir," she began, her words tumbling out. "The ghost of Lady Margaret, who died in this square 100 years past. Jilted she was, and took her own life in grief. Now she walks at dusk, all in white, and that wail, oh, sir, it chills the blood." Mrs. Henshaw leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And it's not just sightings. Things have gone missing. Jewellery, silver, even a rare book from Sir Reginald's library. The police, they laugh, but I know what I've seen." Hastings stifled a chuckle, but Poirot's expression remained grave. He leaned back, his fingers steepled, his mind already sifting through her words. "This Lady Margaret," he said, "her story is known to all in the square, oui? And these thefts, when did they begin?" 3 weeks ago, sir," Mrs. Henshaw replied. "First, it was Mrs. Lawrence's sapphire brooch, then Mr. Carver's emerald ring, and now Sir Reginald's book. Inspector Japp came, but he found nothing. No footprints, no broken locks. It's her, I tell you." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of amusement or scepticism. Hastings could not tell. "A ghost who steals, madame. Most intriguing. But Hercule Poirot does not chase phantoms. I chase facts. Tell me, who else has seen this apparition?" Mrs. Henshaw listed the witnesses. Miss Evelyn Ward, a spinster at number 14, who swore she saw the ghost's face. Young Mr. Lawrence, who glimpsed a figure near the fountain, and even Daniel Reed, the groundskeeper, who fled his post after a sighting. Poirot listened, his head tilted, absorbing every detail. When she finished, he rose, his small frame radiating purpose. "Merci, madame. I shall visit the square myself. The truth, it hides in the shadows, but Poirot will find it." After Mrs. Henshaw departed, Hastings shook his head. "A ghost, Poirot? Surely you don't believe this nonsense?" Poirot smiled, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Believe, Hastings? I believe in the human mind, which creates such tales to conceal its deeds. Come, we shall take a turn in the square and see what the fog reveals." They stepped into the crisp morning air, the mist curling around the garden's iron gates. The square was quiet, save for the rustle of leaves and the distant clatter of a milk cart. Poirot paused by the central fountain, its stone basin dry and cracked, and studied the ground with the intensity of a scholar deciphering a manuscript. "Observe, Hastings," he said, pointing to a faint scuff mark on the cobblestones. "Something has disturbed this place, and recently. Not a ghost, I think, but someone who wishes us to believe in one." As they returned to number 17, the wail sounded again, faint but unmistakable, drifting from the direction of the fountain. Hastings shivered, but Poirot's lips curved into a smile. "The game, it begins," he murmured, "and Hercule Poirot, he is ready to play." Chapter 2. The Residents of the Square. The morning after Mrs. Henshaw's visit, Kensington Square lay bathed in a pale, reluctant sunlight that did little to dispel the previous night's unease. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his patent leather shoes gleaming, stood at the window of number 17, gazing out at the orderly rows of Georgian houses. His small, precise hands adjusted the curtains, ensuring perfect symmetry, while his grey eyes, sharp and restless, scanned the square for clues invisible to the untrained observer. Captain Hastings, seated at the breakfast table, was engrossed in the morning's Times, muttering about the lack of progress in the police's investigation of the square's thefts. Poirot turned, his moustache quivering with the faintest hint of amusement. "Hastings, mon ami," he said, his voice soft but commanding. "The newspaper. It tells us nothing we do not already know. The police, they chase shadows, but Hercule Poirot seeks the substance behind them. Today we shall meet the residents of this square, for it is in their words, their glances, their hesitations that the truth will reveal itself." Hastings folded the paper with a sigh. "You're certain this isn't just a clever thief playing on superstition? A ghost, Poirot? It's absurd." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Absurd, perhaps, but useful. A thief who cloaks himself in the garb of a ghost is no ordinary criminal. He wishes to distract, to mislead. But to mislead whom? And why? That is what we shall discover." Their plan was simple, yet methodical, in keeping with Poirot's love of order. They would visit each household in Kensington Square, beginning with those who had reported thefts or sightings of the so-called ghost of Lady Margaret. Poirot carried a small notebook, its pages pristine, ready to capture every detail, while Hastings, ever the faithful companion, followed with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Their first call was at number 10, the residence of Sir Reginald Blake, a retired diplomat whose booming voice and florid complexion suggested a man accustomed to command. His drawing-room was a shrine to his past glories. Walls lined with leather-bound books, a mahogany desk cluttered with diplomatic correspondence, and a glass case displaying medals from foreign courts. Sir Reginald, a tall figure with a mane of white hair, greeted them with a hearty handshake that nearly dislodged Hastings's spectacles. "Mr. Poirot, is it?" he said, his voice echoing through the room. "Heard of you, of course. Brilliant fellow, they say, though I don't hold with foreigners poking into English affairs. Still, if you can catch this blasted thief, I'll shake your hand myself." Poirot inclined his head, unruffled. "Merci, Sir Reginald. I'm told you have lost a valuable item. A first-edition Moll Flanders, oui?" Sir Reginald's face darkened. his joviality replaced by a scowl. "Indeed, worth a small fortune, that book. Kept it locked in my study, behind glass no less. No sign of a break-in, mind you. The police, Jap and his lot, found nothing. They're calling it this ghost nonsense, but I say it's a clever devil with a skeleton key." Poirot's gaze drifted to the study door, noting the heavy brass lock. "The book, it was taken at night, you say? And you heard nothing? No footsteps? No wail?" "Not a sound," Sir Reginald replied, folding his arms, "though my housekeeper, Mrs. Gale, swears she heard that infernal wailing in the square around dusk. Poppycock, if you ask me. Ghosts don't steal books." Poirot jotted a note, his pencil moving with precision. "And this Mrs. Gale, she has seen the ghost? Says she saw a figure in white near the fountain, flitting about like some blasted spectre. I told her to stop reading penny dreadfuls." Sir Reginald snorted, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Thanking him, Poirot and Hastings moved on to number 14, home of Miss Evelyn Ward, a spinster of indeterminate age, whose nervous demeanour contrasted sharply with Sir Reginald's bluster. Her parlour was a study in faded gentility, doilies on every surface, a chipped teapot steaming on a tray, and a caged canary chirping mournfully. Miss Ward, thin and bird-like, with grey hair pinned tightly, greeted them with a trembling smile. "Oh, Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I knew you'd come. It's dreadful, simply dreadful. The ghost, it's real, I tell you. I saw her face." Poirot seated himself, his posture perfect, and gestured for her to continue. "Describe this face, mademoiselle. Every detail, if you please." Miss Ward clutched her shawl, her eyes wide. "It was pale, deathly pale, with eyes like burning coals. Oh, so terrible. She stood by the garden gate, just at twilight, in a flowing white gown. I was at my window, you see, and I froze. Then that wail came, and I nearly fainted." Hastings, shifting uncomfortably, ventured, "Could it have been a trick of the light, Miss Ward? The fog plays tricks, you know." She shook her head vehemently. No, it was her. Lady Margaret, jilted and vengeful. My grandmother told me her story when I was a girl. She haunts this square, and now she's stealing from us." Poirot's expression remained impassive, but his fingers tapped lightly on his notebook. "And you have lost nothing, mademoiselle? No theft in your home?" Miss Ward hesitated, her hands twisting. "Well, no, but I keep my doors locked and my valuables hidden. Not like poor Mrs. Lawrence or Mr. Carver." They took their leave, Poirot pausing at the door to study the view of the square from Miss Ward's window. "Interesting," he murmured. "Her window faces the fountain directly. Yet she speaks of the gate. A discrepancy, Hastings, however small." Their next visit was to number 15, the home of Mr. Thomas Carver, a widower whose reclusive habits had made him the subject of local gossip. His house was sombre, its curtains drawn, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and neglect. Carver, a gaunt man with hollow cheeks and a guarded manner, received them in a sparsely furnished sitting-room. His eyes, shadowed and wary, barely met Poirot's as he spoke. "I've no time for ghost stories," Carver said brusquely, his voice low. "My wife's emerald ring was stolen from my bedroom safe. That's all you need to know. The police have been useless." Poirot's head tilted, his gaze piercing. "The safe, monsieur. It was locked, oui? And only you knew the combination." Carver nodded, his jaw tight. "Yes, no one else had access. I don't know how it was done, but I want that ring back. It was hers, you understand?" Poirot noted the man's clenched fists, the faint tremor in his voice. "And the ghost, monsieur? Have you seen it?" Carver's lips thinned. "I don't waste my time with nonsense. I heard the wail once, late at night, but I didn't go chasing shadows. Ask Mrs. Henshaw. She's the one who's obsessed with this Lady Margaret business." Hastings, sensing the man's discomfort, pressed gently. "You live alone, Mr. Carver, except for your housekeeper? No staff? No visitors?" Carver's eyes narrowed. "Just Mrs. Henshaw and that groundskeeper Reed, though he's gone now. Good riddance, if you ask me. Always poking about where he shouldn't." Poirot made a final note, his face unreadable. "Merci, monsieur. We shall trouble you no further, for now." Their final call was at number 16, the residence of Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence, a young couple whose recent marriage had been the talk of the square. Their home was bright and modern, with fresh paint and vibrant curtains, a stark contrast to Carver's gloom. Mrs. Lawrence, a striking woman with auburn hair and a charming smile, welcomed them warmly, while her husband, a handsome man with an easy laugh, offered brandy despite the early hour. Their sapphire brooch, a wedding gift, had been among the stolen items. "It's dreadful," Mrs. Lawrence said, her green eyes wide with distress. "The brooch was my mother's. We kept it in a locked box in our bedroom, but it vanished 2 weeks ago. The police found no trace of a break-in." Mr. Lawrence nodded, his arm around his wife. "We've heard the wail, too, and I saw something odd one evening, a figure in white, near the fountain. I thought it was a prank, but now I'm not so sure." Poirot's gaze lingered on the couple, noting their easy familiarity and the way Mrs. Lawrence's fingers toyed with a pearl earring. "You are newlyweds, oui? And yet you seem remarkably composed for those who have suffered such a loss." Mrs. Lawrence laughed, a touch too brightly. "We try to keep our spirits up, Mr. Poirot. Gossip travels fast in this square, and we'd rather not fuel it." As they left, Poirot paused on the steps, his eyes scanning the square once more. The fountain, its stone weathered but imposing, stood at the centre, a silent witness to the night's mysteries. "Hastings," he said, his voice low, "there is a thread here, a pattern, but it is tangled. Each resident tells a story, yet none tells the whole truth. Sir Reginald's bluster hides his fear. Miss Ward's terror is too vivid, too rehearsed. Carver conceals something, perhaps guilt, and the Lawrences, so charming, yet their charm is a mask." Hastings frowned, struggling to keep up. "You think they're all lying? But why? And how does a thief get into locked rooms without a trace?" Poirot smiled, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "That, mon ami, is the question. The ghost is a fiction, a clever disguise, but for what purpose? To steal trinkets or something more? We must look beyond the surface, to the motives that lie beneath." They returned to number 17 as the sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long shadows across the square. Poirot sat at his desk, his notebook open, sketching a diagram of the square with precise lines. Each house was marked, each resident's name and loss noted in his meticulous script. "The fountain," he murmured, circling its place on the map. "It is the heart of this mystery. The wail comes from there. The sightings cluster there. Tomorrow we shall examine it closely." Hastings, settling into an armchair, shook his head. "You're putting too much stock in that old fountain, Poirot. It's just stone and moss." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Stone and moss, oui, but also secrets. Every mystery has its centre, Hastings, and this one lies in the square itself. We shall find it, and with it, the truth." As night fell, the square grew silent, save for the faint rustle of leaves and the distant hum of London beyond. Poirot closed his notebook, his mind already weaving the threads of suspicion into a tapestry only he could yet see. The ghost of Kensington Square was no spectre, but a puzzle, and Hercule Poirot was determined to solve it. Chapter 3. The Clue in the Fountain. The dawn of the following day broke with a chill that seeped into the bones of Kensington Square, the mist lingering like a reluctant guest. Hercule Poirot, ever fastidious, had risen early, his morning ritual of grooming completed with the precision of a Swiss watch. His black coffee, served in a cup of pristine white china, steamed gently on the table, as he studied his notebook, its pages now filled with neat annotations from the previous day's interviews. Captain Hastings, less inclined to early rising, joined him with a yawn, his hair slightly dishevelled, but his spirits buoyed by the prospect of action. "Mon ami," Poirot said, closing the notebook with a decisive snap. "Today we turn our attention to the heart of this mystery, the fountain. It is no mere ornament, I think, but a stage for our so-called ghost's performance. We shall uncover its secrets." Hastings, buttering a slice of toast, raised an eyebrow. "The fountain? It's been dry for years, Poirot. What could it possibly tell us?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with that familiar spark of certainty. "Everything, Hastings, has something to tell if one knows how to listen. The fountain is the focal point of the sightings, the source of the wail. It is, as the poets say, the still point in the turning world. Come, we shall investigate." They stepped into the square, the air sharp with the scent of damp leaves and coal smoke. The garden, enclosed by its wrought-iron gates, was silent save for the occasional coo of a pigeon. The fountain stood at its centre, a relic of the square's Georgian origins, its tiered basins carved with cherubs and vines, now weathered by time and neglect. The stone was streaked with moss, and the lower basin, dry as bone, held a scattering of fallen leaves. Poirot circled the structure, his small frame moving with the grace of a cat, his eyes darting over every detail. He crouched, brushing aside leaves to reveal the stone beneath. "Observe, Hastings," he said, pointing to a faint crescent-shaped mark etched into the basin's edge. "This is recent, not weathered like the rest. A tool, perhaps, used with force." Hastings peered over his shoulder, squinting. "A tool? You mean like a chisel?" "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his voice low. "Or something more specific, a grappling hook, a crowbar, something to aid in climbing or prying. This mark is no accident." He straightened, his gaze sweeping the surrounding garden. The rose bushes, still clinging to their last blooms, caught his attention. He stepped closer, his gloved fingers delicately lifting a thorny branch. There, snagged among the thorns, was a scrap of white fabric, its edges frayed, but its texture unmistakably fine. Poirot extracted it with care, holding it to the light. "Silk," he murmured. "Expensive, delicate, not the garb of a ghost, but of someone who wishes to be seen as one." Hastings frowned, his practical mind grappling with the implications. "So the thief uses the fountain as what, a hiding place? A lookout?" Poirot pocketed the fabric, his expression unreadable. "A stage, Hastings. The fountain is where the ghost performs, where the wail is heard. But how is this wail produced? It is too consistent, too timed to be human." They continued their examination, Poirot tapping the stone with his cane, listening for hollows or irregularities. Finding none, he turned his attention to the upper tiers, climbing onto the basin's edge with surprising agility for a man of his stature. He peered into the topmost basin, where a rusted pipe, once meant to carry water, lay exposed. "Interesting," he said, his voice echoing slightly. "This pipe, it is not as rusted as it should be. Someone has tampered with it." Hastings, standing below, looked skeptical. "Tampered? For what purpose? The fountain hasn't worked in decades." Poirot descended, dusting his hands. "For the purpose of deception, mon ami. I suspect this pipe may hold the secret of the wail, but we shall need tools to confirm it." Determined to pursue this lead, Poirot summoned Mrs. Henshaw, who arrived breathless and anxious, her apron slightly askew. "Mr. Poirot, sir, have you found something? Is it the ghost?" Poirot smiled, his manner soothing. "Not a ghost, madame, but a clue. Tell me, has anyone been seen near the fountain recently? Perhaps the groundskeeper, Monsieur Reed?" Mrs. Henshaw hesitated, her eyes darting to the fountain. "Daniel Reed, sir. He was always tending the garden, but he kept to himself. I did see him near the fountain once, late in the evening with a bag of tools. I thought he was fixing something." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Tools, you say? And where is Monsieur Reed now?" "Gone, sir," she replied, her voice dropping. "Left 2 days ago, sudden-like. Said he was frightened by the ghost. I didn't believe him. He's a sturdy lad, not one for fancies." Poirot thanked her, his mind already turning. "Hastings," he said, as they returned to number 17. "This Reed is a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole. He may have seen something or done something, but he is not our mastermind. The silk, the mark, these suggest a plan more sophisticated than a groundskeeper's scheme." Back in their lodgings, Poirot spread his findings on the table. The scrap of silk, a sketch of the crescent mark, and his notes on the fountain's pipe. He paced, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind a whirlwind of deduction. "The whale," he said. "It is mechanical, I am certain. A device hidden in the fountain, triggered at precise times to create fear. But why? To distract from the thefts, but also to protect something or someone." Hastings, sipping tea, ventured a theory. Could the fountain be a hiding place for the stolen goods? The brooch, the ring, the book? Poirot shook his head. "Non, Hastings. The thefts are too public, too theatrical. The stolen items are a diversion, I think, from a greater prize. We must speak to Inspector Japp. He will have resources to examine the fountain further." That afternoon Japp arrived, his face a mask of exasperation. "Poirot, I've got better things to do than chase ghosts in Kensington. The yard's swamped, and you're poking around a dry fountain?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Not dry in secrets, mon ami. This scrap of silk, this mark, they point to a human hand, not a spectral one. I ask only that you send a man to inspect the fountain's pipe. There may be a device, a mechanism that produces the whale." Japp sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "All right, I'll humour you. But if this turns out to be a wild goose chase, you owe me a pint." "Agreed," Poirot said, his smile serene. "But Hercule Poirot does not chase geese. He finds truth." As Japp departed to arrange the inspection, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression grave. "The fountain is the key, but it is not the whole lock. The residents, Sir Reginald, Miss Ward, Carver, the Lawrences, they each hold a piece of this puzzle. Tomorrow we shall press them further, for one of them knows more than they say." The day drew to a close, the square settling into its twilight hush. Poirot stood at the window, watching the fountain's silhouette against the fading light. The wail sounded again, faint but piercing, and Hastings shivered despite the fire's warmth. "It's uncanny, Poirot," he said. "Even knowing it's a trick, it gets under your skin." Poirot nodded, his gaze fixed on the fountain. "A trick, oui, but a clever one. And Hercule Poirot, he is cleverer still. Tomorrow, the fountain will speak, and we shall listen." Chapter 4. The Midnight Vigil. The fog had thickened over Kensington Square by the evening, wrapping the Georgian houses in a gauzy veil that muffled the sounds of London beyond. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the damp chill, sat in the parlour of number 17, his small hands folded over the head of his cane, his grey eyes alight with purpose. The discoveries at the fountain, the crescent mark, the scrap of silk, had only sharpened his resolve. Captain Hastings, less enamoured of the prospect of a cold night's work, sipped his tea with a grimace, the eerie wail from the previous evening still echoing in his memory. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the crackle of the fire. "Tonight we shall catch our ghost, or at least glimpse its shadow. The fountain is the stage, and the thief performs at dusk or later. We must be there, unseen, to observe the act." Hastings set down his cup, his brow furrowed. "A vigil, Poirot? In this weather? We'll catch our death before we catch a thief. And what if it's just another trick of the fog?" Poirot's moustache curved upward in a faint smile. "The fog? It aids the thief. but it will not hide him from Hercule Poirot. We shall be discreet, like the mice in the walls, and we shall see what moves in the dark." Their preparations were meticulous, as befitted Poirot's love of order. They donned dark overcoats to blend with the shadows, and Poirot insisted on wrapping a scarf around Hastings's neck, muttering about the dangers of a chill to the English constitution. Armed with a flashlight and Poirot's ever-present notebook, they slipped into the square just before midnight, the iron gates creaking softly as they entered the garden. The fountain loomed ahead, its stone cherubs ghostly in the mist, and Poirot selected a spot among the dense shrubs, where the foliage offered concealment without obstructing their view. They settled in, the ground cold beneath them, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth and fading roses. Hastings crouched awkwardly, whispered, "How long do we wait, Poirot? This could take hours." "Patience, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice barely audible. "The thief is precise, methodical. The whale comes at dusk or in the early hours. We shall not wait long." The square was silent, save for the occasional drip of moisture from the oaks and the distant bark of a dog. The minutes stretched into an hour, then two, and Hastings's legs began to cramp. He shifted, stifling a groan, but Poirot remained still as a statue, his eyes fixed on the fountain. The fog swirled, parting briefly to reveal the lamplight's dim glow, and Hastings began to doubt the wisdom of their vigil. "Perhaps they've stopped for the night," he murmured. Poirot's hand gripped his arm, silencing him. "Listen," he whispered. At precisely 2 a.m., a faint sound broke the stillness. Not the wail, but a soft rustle, like fabric brushing against stone. Then, from the shadows near the fountain, a figure emerged, a fleeting silhouette draped in white, gliding with an unnatural grace. The wail followed, low and mournful, rising from the fountain's direction and sending a shiver through Hastings despite his skepticism. The figure paused, its head turning as if scanning the square, then moved swiftly toward number 12, Mrs. Henshaw's residence, and vanished behind the fountain's bulk. Poirot sprang forward, his agility belying his compact frame, and Hastings scrambled to follow. They reached the fountain in seconds, but the figure was gone, as if swallowed by the fog. Poirot's flashlight swept the ground, revealing a single pearl earring, its luster catching the beam. He picked it up with a handkerchief, holding it aloft like a trophy. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "our ghost is careless." Hastings, breathless, peered into the fog. "Where did they go? There's no trace." Poirot's eyes narrowed, studying the earring. "This is no ordinary thief, Hastings. The movement, the timing, it is a performance, calculated to terrify and distract. But this earring, it is a mistake, a clue to the true identity of our spectre." They searched the area around the fountain, but the fog and darkness yielded nothing more. No footprints, no further scraps of fabric. Poirot examined the fountain again, his flashlight probing the upper tiers, but the pipe they had noted earlier showed no new signs of tampering. "The whale," he said. "It came from here, I am certain. But the device remains hidden for now." Returning to number 17, Poirot placed the earring on the table beside the silk scrap, his mind already weaving connections. "This earring," he said, "it is fine, elegant. Not the possession of a common thief, but of someone with means, someone known to us." Hastings, warming his hands by the fire, ventured a guess. "Mrs. Lawrence? She wears pearl earrings, doesn't she? And she lost that sapphire brooch." Poirot nodded slowly. "A possibility, Hastings, but we must not leap to conclusions. The earring may belong to her, or it may be a plant, meant to mislead. The thief is clever, but not infallible. Tomorrow we shall visit number 12 and learn what secrets it holds." As they retired, the square outside lay silent, the fog a heavy curtain over its mysteries. Poirot, however, was undeterred, his little grey cells working tirelessly. "The ghost plays its part well," he said, his voice soft but resolute. But Hercule Poirot writes the final act. Chapter 5. The Secret of Number 12. The morning sun struggled through the fog that clung to Kensington Square, casting a pallid light over the Georgian facades. Hercule Poirot, his morning ablutions completed with meticulous care, stood before the mirror in number 17, adjusting his tie with the precision of an artist. The pearl earring, now safely stored in a velvet-lined box, lay on the table beside his notebook, its presence a silent challenge to his little grey cells. Captain Hastings, fortified by a hearty breakfast of eggs and kippers, was less sanguine, his mind still reeling from the midnight vigil and the fleeting glimpse of the white-clad figure. "Poirot," he said, stirring his tea, "that earring, it's got to be Mrs. Lawrence's, hasn't it? She's the only one we've seen wearing pearls, and she's already lost that brooch. It's too much of a coincidence." Poirot turned, his moustache twitching with a hint of amusement. "Coincidence, mon ami? Hercule Poirot does not trust in coincidences. The earring is a clue, oui, but whether it points to Madame Laurence or to a cleverer deception, we shall see. Today we turn our attention to number 12, the house of Madame Henshaw and her elusive employer, Monsieur Carver. The ghost favours this house, and I suspect it holds more than shadows." Hastings frowned, setting down his spoon. "But why number 12? It's just a gloomy old place, and Mrs. Henshaw seems harmless enough. What could be there?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The stage, Hastings. The ghost appears near number 12, vanishes behind the fountain, and leaves its traces there. The house is the backdrop to this charade, and we shall uncover its secrets." With Mrs. Henshaw's permission, secured by a courteous note sent earlier that morning, Poirot and Hastings arrived at number 12, just as the clock struck 10. The house was a study in faded grandeur, its exterior pristine, but its interior heavy with the weight of neglect. The air smelled of wax polish and old books, and the floorboards creaked underfoot as Mrs. Henshaw led them inside. Her hands fluttered nervously, her eyes darting to the corners of the hall as if expecting the ghost to materialize. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice tremulous, "I hope you'll find something to put an end to this dreadful business. I can't sleep for the fear of that whale." Poirot offered a reassuring smile. "Fear not, madame. Hercule Poirot seeks only the truth, and the truth is no friend to phantoms. May we examine the house, particularly the upper floors?" Mrs. Henshaw nodded, leading them through a maze of dim corridors and up a narrow staircase. The house was larger than it appeared, its rooms filled with heavy furniture, draped in dust sheets, portraits of stern ancestors gazing down from the walls. Poirot's eyes missed nothing, noting the polished banister, the faint scuff marks on the stairs, and the peculiar absence of dust in certain corners. "This house," murmured to Hastings. "It is lived in, yet not lived in. A paradox, no?" Their search began in the attic, a low-ceilinged space cluttered with trunks and cobwebs. Poirot moved with purpose, his cane tapping the floorboards as he tested for hollows. Near the far wall, he paused, his gaze fixed on a small trapdoor set into the ceiling, its edges barely visible. "Voilà," he said, pointing. "Away to the roof, Hastings, and observe, the hinges, they are oiled, recently used." Hastings, craning his neck, looked sceptical. "A trapdoor? But why would anyone need to get to the roof?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "To move unseen, mon ami. A thief who walks the rooftops avoids the eyes of the square. Let us see what else this attic conceals." With Mrs. Henshaw's help, they fetched a ladder, and Poirot ascended with surprising agility, pushing open the trapdoor. The roof was a flat expanse of lead, surrounded by a low parapet, offering a clear view of the square and its neighbouring houses. Poirot examined the surface, noting faint scratches that matched the crescent mark from the fountain. "A grappling hook," he said. used to scale walls or secure a rope. Our ghost is an acrobat, perhaps. Descending, they continued their search, and in a shadowed corner of the attic, behind a stack of crates, Poirot found a hidden compartment in the floor. He pried it open with his cane, revealing a small cache, a folded white silk gown, its hem stained with mud, and a crowbar with a crescent-shaped tip. Hastings gasped, but Poirot's expression remained calm, almost satisfied. "The costume of our ghost," he said, lifting the gown to the light. "Silk, like the scrap we found. And this crowbar, it matches the mark at the fountain. We have found the tools of the trade, Hastings, but not yet the hand that wields them." Mrs. Henshaw, hovering nearby, clutched her apron. "Oh, sir, that's not mine. I swear I've never seen it before." Poirot patted her hand gently. "I believe you, madame, but tell me, who has access to this attic? Monsieur Carver? The groundskeeper, Monsieur Reed?" She hesitated, her eyes wide. "Mr. Carver comes and goes, sir, but he's rarely here. The attic's locked, and I keep the key. Daniel Reed, he had a key to the garden shed, but he could have gotten into the house when I wasn't looking. He was always poking about, that one." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "And Monsieur Carver, when did you last see him?" "Yesterday, sir, just before you came. He was in a state, muttering about his ring and the ghost. Said he'd be away for a few days." They thanked Mrs. Henshaw and returned to the parlour, where Poirot examined the gown and crowbar in detail. The gown was finely made, its stitching precise, suggesting a tailor of quality. The crowbar, though utilitarian, bore traces of paint that matched the fountain stone. "These are not the tools of a common thief," Poirot said, his voice low. "They speak of planning, of resources, but why hide them here, in number 12? Hastings, pacing, ventured a theory. "Perhaps Reed is the thief, Poirot. He had access, he knew the house, and he's vanished. It fits." Poirot shook his head. "No, Hastings. Reed is a pawn, perhaps, but not the king. He fled because he saw something, or because he was told to flee. The true thief uses number 12 as a base, but they are not its master. We must learn more of Monsieur Carver's affairs." That afternoon, Poirot sent a telegram to Inspector Japp, requesting information on Carver's financial status and any known associates. Japp's reply arrived swiftly, confirming that Carver's business ventures had faltered in recent years, leaving him in debt. A motive, perhaps, Poirot mused, but not the whole story. As evening fell, Poirot sat by the fire, the gown and crowbar laid out before him, the pearl earring glinting in its box. "The puzzle takes shape, Hastings," he said. "The ghost is a masquerade, staged from number 12, but its purpose remains hidden. The thefts, jewellery, a book, a ring, they are too varied, too deliberate. They distract from something greater." Hastings, warming his hands, looked puzzled. "Greater? You mean there's more at stake than a few valuables?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Much more, mon ami. The thief plays a dangerous game, and number 12 is the board. Tomorrow we shall find Daniel Reed. He knows something, and Hercule Poirot will make him speak." The square outside grew dark, the fog settling like a shroud. The wail did not sound that night, but Poirot felt its absence as keenly as its presence, a sign that the thief was watching, waiting. The game, he knew, was far from over. Chapter 6. The Trail of the Thief. The morning air in Kensington Square carried a bite of frost, the fog having retreated to reveal a sky of unrelenting grey. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned to the chin and his scarf meticulously arranged, stood at the threshold of number 17, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the doorstep. The discoveries in number 12, the silk gown, the crowbar, the oil trapdoor, had sharpened his focus, and the pearl earring, still nestled in its velvet box, was a silent accusation against an unseen foe. Captain Hastings, bundled against the cold, joined him. his expression a mix of determination and lingering doubt about their nocturnal adventure. "Poirot," Hastings said, pulling his hat low. "This Reed fellow, do you really think he's the key? He's just a groundskeeper, and he's bolted. Sounds like a guilty man to me." Poirot's grey eyes flickered with a hint of reproof. "Guilty perhaps, mon ami, but of what? Fleeing in fear, or something more? Daniel Reed is a thread in our tapestry, and we must pull it to see where it leads. To Whitechapel we go, for that is where our quarry has fled." Their journey to Whitechapel was a stark contrast to the refined elegance of Kensington. The streets were a clamour of costermongers' cries, the rattle of carts, and the stench of coal smoke and unwashed humanity. Poirot, undeterred by the squalor, navigated the narrow lanes with the precision of a compass, his polished shoes miraculously avoiding the muck. Hastings followed, his discomfort evident, muttering about the wisdom of chasing a groundskeeper into such a place. Poirot had learned from Mrs. Henshaw that Daniel Reed had taken lodgings in a boarding house on Cable Street, a grim establishment with peeling paint and a sagging roof. The landlady, a wiry woman with a face like a weathered apple, eyed them suspiciously but confirmed Reed's presence. "He's in his room, second floor," she said, pocketing Poirot's shilling. "Keeps to himself, but he's paid up, so I don't ask questions." They climbed the creaking stairs, the air thick with the smell of cabbage and damp plaster. Poirot knocked sharply on Reed's door, and after a moment's hesitation, it opened to reveal a young man in his 20s, lanky and unshaven, with eyes that darted like a cornered animal's. His shirt was rumpled, and a faint scar ran across his left cheek, a detail that made Poirot's moustache twitch with recognition. "Monsieur Reed," Poirot began, his voice calm but authoritative. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings. We wish to speak of Kensington Square and the events that drove you from it." Reed's face paled, and he stepped back, gesturing them inside. The room was sparse, a narrow bed, a cracked washstand, and a single chair. "I ain't done nothing wrong," he said, his voice edged with defiance. "I left because of that ghost. Scared me half to death, it did." Poirot seated himself on the chair, his posture impeccable despite the room's grimness. "A ghost, you say? Describe this apparition, if you please, every detail." Reed shifted, his hands twisting. "It was at dusk near the fountain. A figure in white, gliding like it didn't touch the ground. I heard that wail. God, it was awful. I saw its face, pale, with eyes like fire. I dropped my tools and ran." Poirot's gaze sharpened, noting the scar again. "Eyes like fire, monsieur? Or perhaps a mask, reflecting the lamplight? You are certain of what you saw?" Reed hesitated, his bravado faltering. I don't know. It was quick, but I didn't steal nothing, I swear." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but relentless. "Yet you had access to number 12, oui? The attic, the trapdoor to the roof. And you knew of Monsieur Carver's safe, did you not?" Reed's eyes widened, and he slumped onto the bed. "All right. I overheard Carver talking to someone, don't know who, about a safe in his study. Bonds, he said, worth a fortune. I thought about taking a look, maybe, but I never did. That ghost scared me off before I could try." Hastings, standing by the door, crossed his arms. "Convenient, Reed. You overhear about a fortune, then vanish when things get hot. Where were you 2 nights ago, when we saw the figure?" Reed's hands shook. "I was here, I swear. I ain't been back to the square since I left. Ask the landlady. She'll tell you I've not gone out at night." Poirot studied him, his mind sifting through the man's words. The scar, the nervous demeanour, the story of the safe, it fit, yet it did not. Reed was no mastermind, but he was a witness, perhaps a pawn in a larger game. "Monsieur Reed," Poirot said, rising, "you will remain here until I say otherwise. The police may wish to speak with you. If you flee again, it will not go well." Reed nodded, his defiance gone. "I ain't going nowhere, sir. I just want this over." As they left the boarding house, Hastings shook his head. "He's hiding something, Poirot. He knows more than he's letting on." "Oui, Hastings," Poirot replied, his cane tapping the pavement, "but not the whole truth. Reed saw the ghost or something like it, and it frightened him. But the safe, the bonds, these are to the heart of the matter. The thefts of jewellery and books, they are mere distractions, I think, from a greater prize." Back at number 17, Poirot spread his notes across the table, adding Reed's testimony to the growing tapestry. The silk gown, the crowbar, the earring, the crescent mark, all pointed to a calculated scheme, but the motive remained elusive. He paced, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind a whirlwind of deduction. "The safe in number 12, he murmured. "Carver's bonds. Why steal trinkets when a fortune lies hidden? Unless the trinkets are a screen, a way to draw attention elsewhere." Hastings, warming his hands by the fire, ventured a thought. Could Carver himself be behind it? "He's in debt, you said. Maybe he's staging the thefts to claim insurance, or to hide something else." Poirot paused, his eyes gleaming. "A shrewd thought, Hastings, but incomplete. Carver is involved, perhaps, but he is not alone. The ghost requires an accomplice, someone agile, someone who knows the square. The earring suggests Madame Laurence, but we must be cautious. The thief anticipates our moves." That evening, Poirot sent another telegram to Inspector Japp, requesting a discreet watch on Reed's boarding house and any records of Carver's financial dealings. Japp's reply was curt but promised action. As night fell, the square was quiet, the fountain silent under its shroud of mist. Poirot stood at the window, his silhouette sharp against the lamplight. "The trail of the thief leads us closer, Hastings," he said, his voice low. "Reed has given us a piece of the puzzle, but the picture is not yet clear. Tomorrow we shall return to the square and confront its residents. One of them holds the key, and Hercule Poirot will turn it." Chapter 7. The Masquerade, Unravelled. The pale light of a late September morning filtered through the curtains of number 17, casting delicate shadows across the parlour where Hercule Poirot sat, his small hands folded over his notebook. The air was crisp, the fog having lifted to reveal Kensington Square in all its Georgian dignity. The discoveries of the past days, the silk gown, the crowbar, the pearl earring, and Daniel Reed's halting confession, had woven an intricate web, and Poirot's little grey cells were now poised to unravel it. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, sat opposite, his breakfast untouched, his brow furrowed with anticipation. "Poirot," he said, stirring his coffee absently, "you've got all the pieces now. The gown, the earring, Reed's story about the safe. Surely it's time to call Japp and make an arrest. Mrs. Lawrence seems the obvious culprit, doesn't she?" Poirot's eyes twinkled with a mixture of amusement and reproof. "Obvious, mon ami? The obvious is the enemy of truth. The earring points to Madame Laurence. Oui, but a clever mind plants such clues to mislead. No, we must gather the players of this drama and reveal the masquerade in its entirety. Today, we shall hold a little reunion in the square, and Hercule Poirot will lay bare the heart of this mystery." With characteristic precision, Poirot arranged for the residents of Kensington Square to assemble in Sir Reginald Blake's drawing room at number 10 that afternoon. Invitations were sent to Sir Reginald, Miss Evelyn Ward, Mr. Thomas Carver, Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence, and Mrs. Henshaw, with Inspector Japp summoned to lend official weight. Japp arrived first, his face a mask of weary scepticism, his overcoat damp from a brief shower. "Poirot," he said, settling into a chair, "I hope this isn't another of your theatrical stunts. I've got men watching Reed, and we've confirmed Carver's debts, but this ghost business is wearing thin." Poirot smiled serenely. "Patience, mon ami. The ghost is but a costume, and today we shall unmask its wearer. you will see the method of Hercule Poirot at work. By 3 o'clock, the drawing room was filled with the residents, their expressions ranging from curiosity to unease. Sir Reginald stood by the fireplace, his arms crossed, his booming voice muted to a grumble. Miss Ward perched on a velvet chair, her hands clutching a handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously. Carver, gaunt and silent, sat apart, his gaze fixed on the floor. Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence, impeccably dressed, sat close together, their smiles strained but polite. Mrs. Henshaw hovered near the door, her apron smoothed as if to ward off the tension. Poirot stood before them, his small frame commanding the room, his cane resting lightly against his side. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and measured, "you are gathered because Kensington Square has been plagued by a thief who masquerades as a ghost. The legend of Lady Margaret, jilted and vengeful, has been used to conceal a crime most ingenious. But Hercule Poirot sees through such disguises, and today the truth will be revealed." He produced the silk gown, holding it aloft for all to see. "This, found in the attic of number 12, is the costume of our ghost. Silk, finely made, not the garb of a spectre, but of a living person." Murmurs rippled through the room, and Mrs. Henshaw gasped, her hand to her mouth. Poirot continued, placing the crowbar on the table. "This tool, with its crescent tip, matches a mark found on the fountain, where the ghost performs its nightly charade. And this," he held up the pearl earring, its lustre catching the light, "was dropped near the fountain, a careless mistake by our thief." Mrs. Lawrence's hand flew to her ear, her face paling. "That's mine!" she exclaimed, then faltered. "I mean, I lost one like it weeks ago." Poirot's gaze fixed on her, unyielding but calm. "Indeed, madam, and we shall return to that. But first, let us consider the stage of this drama, the fountain." He produced a small whistle from his pocket, its metal gleaming. "This, mes amis, was found by Inspector Japp's men in the fountain's pipe. A simple device, triggered by a timer, to produce the ghostly wail that has so terrified the square. No phantom, but a trick most mechanical." Miss Ward's handkerchief trembled, and Sir Reginald snorted. "A whistle? Preposterous! Who'd go to such lengths?" Poirot turned to the group, his voice rising slightly. "Someone with much to gain, Sir Reginald. The thefts, your book, Madame Lawrence's brooch, Monsieur Carver's ring, are but a distraction. The true prize lies in number 12, in a safe known to few, containing bonds of great value." Carver's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "What are you implying, Poirot? I've been robbed, same as the others." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Have you, monsieur, or have you orchestrated this masquerade? Let us reconstruct the scene. The ghost, it appears, near number 12, using the attic trapdoor to access the rooftops, moving unseen to steal from neighbouring houses. The wail, timed to dusk or midnight, creates fear, ensuring no one looks too closely. But the bonds in your safe, Monsieur Carver, these are the true target, are they not?" Carver's face flushed, but he remained silent. Poirot turned to Mrs. Lawrence, his gaze piercing. "And you, madame, played a role in this charade. The earring, it is yours, dropped in haste as you fled from the fountain. Your husband's debts they pressed you to act, did they not? You wore the gown, played the ghost, to aid Monsieur Carver's scheme." Mrs. Lawrence's composure cracked, her eyes filling with tears. I had no choice," she stammered. "Mr. Carver promised to clear our debts if I helped. I only wore the gown a few times to scare people away. I didn't steal anything." Mr. Lawrence rose, his face pale. "Clara, you didn't—" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Monsieur Lawrence, you were unaware, I believe. Your wife acted under duress. But Monsieur Carver," he turned to the widower, whose hands were now clenched, "you devised this plan. In debt, desperate, You staged the thefts to claim insurance, hiding the bonds in number 12 to sell later. The ghost was your creation, with Madame Laurence as your reluctant accomplice. Carver stood, his voice hoarse. You've no proof, Poirot. This is slander. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Proof, monsieur. The gown, the crowbar, the whistle, these are proof. And Daniel Reed, your groundskeeper, he overheard your plans, did he not? You paid him to flee, to draw suspicion, but he spoke to me of the safe. Inspector Japp's men have searched number 12, and the stolen items, book, brooch, ring, were found hidden in your attic, alongside the bonds. Japp stepped forward, his face grim. He's right, Carver. We found everything, just as he said. You're coming with me. Carver slumped, his defiance crumbling. I had to, he muttered. The debts, they were crushing me. I thought no one would suspect a ghost. Mrs. Lawrence sobbed, clinging to her husband, who looked stunned but supportive. Poirot's expression softened, but only slightly. Madam, your part was small, coerced by necessity. The law may be lenient, but you must face it. As Japp led Carver away and arranged for Mrs. Lawrence to be questioned, the room fell silent. Sir Reginald cleared his throat, his bluster subdued. Well, Poirot, you've done it. Damned clever, I'll give you that. Miss Ward, her fear replaced by awe, nodded. No ghost after all, just human greed. Poirot bowed slightly. Greed, mademoiselle, and the desire to deceive. But no deception escapes Hercule Poirot. As the residents dispersed, Hastings clapped Poirot on the shoulder. You've outdone yourself, old chap. But how did you know the whistle was in the fountain? Poirot's moustache twitched with satisfaction. The whale, Hastings. It was too precise, too mechanical. A ghost does not keep a schedule. The fountain was the only logical place for such a device, and the little grey cells, they did not fail. The square outside lay quiet, its secrets exposed, and Poirot returned to number 17, his mind already turning to the next challenge, though none could match the ingenuity of the ghost of Kensington Square. Chapter 8. The Square at Peace. The autumn days grew shorter in Kensington Square, and the crisp air carried a hint of wood smoke as the leaves turned to russet and gold. The fog, once a conspirator in the ghostly charade, had retreated, leaving the Georgian houses bathed in the soft clarity of late September light. Hercule Poirot, his mission accomplished, sat in the parlour of number 17, his small hands cradling a cup of cocoa, prepared to his exacting standards. The fire crackled cheerfully, casting a warm glow over the room's polished surfaces, and Captain Hastings, sprawled in an armchair, leafed through a newspaper with a contented sigh. Well, Poirot, Hastings said, folding the paper, you've done it again. The square's quiet, Carver's in custody, and Mrs. Lawrence is cooperating with Japp. I dare say the residents will sleep better now. Poirot's grey eyes twinkled, his moustache curving in a modest smile. The sleep of the innocent, mon ami, is a fine thing, but it is the truth that brings it. The ghost of Kensington Square was no spectre, but a mirror held up to human greed and desperation. Yet, as always, the little grey cells have prevailed. Hastings chuckled, shaking his head. You make it sound so simple, but I'm still puzzled about one thing. That whistle in the fountain, how did you know it was there, and not, say, hidden in a tree or a drain? Poirot set down his cup, his fingers steepled in that familiar gesture of reflection. The whale, Hastings, was the key. It was too consistent, too timed, like the chime of a clock. A ghost, it does not follow a schedule, but a device does. The fountain, it is the heart of the square, the place where all eyes are drawn. To hide a mechanism there was logical, and the pipe, it was the only place untouched by weather or wear. The little grey cells, they whispered, look there, and I listened. Hastings leaned back, impressed despite himself. And the earring? You suspected Mrs. Lawrence from the start, didn't you? Poirot's expression grew thoughtful. Not from the start, mon ami. The earring was a clue, but a clever one, perhaps meant to mislead. Madame Lawrence was a pawn, coerced by Carver's promises. Her tears, they were genuine, and her role was small. The true architect was Carver, whose debts drove him to weave this tapestry of deception. The parlour door opened, and Mrs. Henshaw entered, bearing a tray of scones and clotted cream. Her face, once pinched with fear, now held a tentative smile. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, setting down the tray. "I can't thank you enough. The square feels like itself again. No more whales or shadows. I've even heard Sir Reginald say he'll host a tea for the neighbours, to put this all behind us." Poirot inclined his head, his courtesy impeccable. "Merci, madame. It is the order of things restored that brings Hercule Poirot satisfaction. But tell me, has Monsieur Reed returned?" Mrs. Henshaw shook her head. "No, sir, and I doubt he will. Inspector Japp says he's cleared of theft, but he's taken work elsewhere. Said he wants no part of ghosts, real or not." As she left, Poirot sipped his cocoa, his gaze drifting to the window. The fountain stood silent, its cherubs serene under the autumn sun. "Reed was wise to flee," he murmured. "He saw too much, yet not enough. A witness, not a villain." Hastings, spreading cream on a scone, paused. "And what about Miss Ward's tales of burning eyes? She seemed so certain of her ghost." Poirot's smile was indulgent. Mademoiselle Ward sees what her imagination paints. The eyes, they were likely the reflection of a mask in the lamplight, as I suspected. Fear, it colours the truth, but Poirot sees through the colours to the canvas beneath. The afternoon passed in quiet contentment, the square outside free of its spectral menace. Poirot, ever restless, began to pack his belongings, his stay in Kensington drawing to a close. Hastings watched, a touch of melancholy in his eyes. "Back to Baker Street, then? Or will you find another mystery to chase?" Poirot closed his suitcase with a snap, his expression serene. "The world, mon ami, is never short of mysteries. But for now, I return to my flat, my books, and perhaps a new blend of tisane. The square is at peace, and so, for a moment, is Hercule Poirot." As dusk fell, they took a final walk through the square, the lamplights casting a golden glow over the cobblestones. The fountain, no longer a stage for deception, stood as a monument to the triumph of reason. Poirot paused, his cane resting lightly on the ground, and surveyed the houses, their windows now warm with life rather than shadowed by fear. "The human heart, Hastings," he said softly. "It is more mysterious than any ghost. It hides its secrets well, but not from Poirot. This case, it reminds us that even in the fog, the truth shines through if one has the eyes to see it." With that, they turned back to number 17, the square at peace behind them, its silence a testament to the brilliance of Hercule Poirot, whose little grey cells had once again brought light to the shadows.